Welcome to Leverage, episode number 5. I have Noah Goldberg, who is the owner of Peter Pan, the iconic bistro in Toronto. If you haven't been there, run, don't walk. And I have him on today just to talk about one of my favorite things, which is entertaining, feeding people, throwing parties. If you know me, I love to do all of the above. And I think there's an art to it. It took me a long time to get better at it. I definitely haven't perfected it. But Noah did and was kind enough to do my TNT party this past fall. And I had people who called me and texted me weeks after asking me who did the food because it was phenomenal, even though he did it all cold under duress. And so he was just the perfect person for me to have on to talk about how to throw a party, the do's and don'ts. So Noah, I don't want to do your bio, but maybe you can give us a little background on how Peter Pan came to be you and all of that good stuff.
Well, it's a pleasure to chat with you.
Yeah, for sure.
It's nice to be here and talk about hosting. My background is I graduated from university and I fell in love with cooking there. In a hosting style. I mean, it was really the first time I ever was on my own cooking for myself and the people around me, you know.
So it wasn't at you, it was like you were just trying to survive and feed yourself.
Yeah, I had this like aha moment where I was like, oh, this is a lot of fun. And I've always enjoyed the way that food brings people together, whether it's hosting a party or even just having some friends around a dinner table. After university, I started cooking professionally in Toronto. Worked here for a couple years and then went to New York, worked there for a couple years. And then
I didn't know that. Where in New York?
I worked for a chef named Daniel Baloud. He has a place here as well. So I worked there for a couple years, really sort of formal French food, really good learning environment. And then I moved back to Toronto for a bit.
Hand up. Is it anything like The Bear?
I haven't actually seen that yet.
What?
I'm not a big of a TV person, but
have to watch that.
I've heard.
I guess it's like the doctor watching ER, right? Like you just, or like when I have like
No,
everybody going, do you watch Selling Sunset? No.
I've heard it's pretty accurate, and I know Maddie's involved, but
oh wow, okay.
I don't. I just haven't seen it for lack of.
Okay, fair enough. Sorry to derail you.
But I will watch it and get back to you.
Okay.
Let you know. So I worked in New York. Then moved back here, worked for a little bit, and then went to London and worked there for a couple chefs that I was really into. And came back to Toronto, had a small little pop-up that was like a really romantic venture for me called The Feasting Room, which was each week we picked a different animal and did a 6-course blind tasting menu around it. It was really sort of a romantic way to showcase how you can explore and use and utilize a whole animal butchery. And then a couple years later after that, I reopened Peter Pan. And yeah, we've been operating there for almost 10 years and serving, making hungry people happy and hosting some events and generally just having a good time and cooking some lovely food.
Yeah, because you have that amazing event space upstairs as well.
Yeah,
right?
we have an event space on the second floor that can host 100 people plus, and we do weddings and social gatherings and that sort of thing. But again, we're lucky to have all these different sort of service styles that we'll be discussing today entwined within the restaurant. So we'll do everything from a formal dinner service to canapé or platter or all those different hosting techniques that people see at home.
Great. And then also, I think if I'm not getting this wrong, during COVID, Peter Pantry was sorry, and I think it's just such a cool idea. I feel like we should touch on that before we move on.
Yeah, so we were lucky enough during COVID to sort of focus on some projects that we thought would be a little bit more longer lasting than the traditional meals at home or trying to get people to sort of curbside pickup sort of thing. So we really focused on a lot of jarred products and pantry products and cocktails and wine, all that we make in-house and feature within the pantry, which is an online retail store as well as a brick and mortar store next to our restaurant. And there's a lot of cross use with all the products. Mm-hmm. So it's really nice that we're able to have products that we're proud for people to take home, as well as the chefs are able to utilize within the kitchen seasonally.
Yeah. He's got some amazing products, and aside from like picking up like a coffee while you're there, there's some gorgeous wines that you have on your wine list that are just stunning that you can't get at the LCBO. And then the pantry items, I mean, if you're putting together, a hostess gift you're up to 12 different cocktails too. The 2 serving
so we have
cocktails are super
pre-batched
cool.
cocktails that are really
They're
popular.
so delicious.
Again, for hosting, the idea of the pantry is that you can come in there and sort of find some specialty products, whether it's beverage or, savory or sweet, that you can then take back that'll tell a story. And that's really the nice thing about it, is that they're handmade, they're curated, and that they're made in order to tell a story of where they come from or how they were made.
Totally. Some of my favorite things that I have in my house are like when you go to a restaurant, you're like, oh my God, this hot sauce you make in house, can I take it home? They're like, sorry, we don't sell it. Yeah. How's it, like, what a miss, right?
Yeah, except that you're more likely to go back. But yeah, we have embraced if you want to take it home, we're happy to put
You're
it
selling
in
the secrets. You're selling the secrets.
Yeah. Well, it's nice. It's really nice.
All right. So I mean, I think that there's, I feel like if you're a client of mine, we've definitely talked about hosting and talked about every, home has that place where you bring your family together, whether it's, your own family, whether you're having like a big, holiday Christmas Rosh Hashanah dinner, or you're just having I have friends that do this fabulous like summer party every year. There's so many ways. So I kind of want to just touch on that. Like let's say our demographic, I'm older than you, my demographic, we've got, we live in a house, we've got a backyard, we want to throw a party. One of the things that I've always believed in, budget or no budget, is enjoy your own party, right? Like, don't take it upon yourself to do everything because you'll never enjoy your party. But, what are some of the top tips you would say about, someone who wants to throw a party for, let's say, you've got your top 30 friends, that type of thing?
Yeah, I would say that there's like a delicate balance between being a host and being a guest at your own party. And there's certain ways to mitigate that, and that's to do with workload and comfort level in terms of what you're trying to put out. So if you're trying to do a 6-course tasting menu for you and your friends, and you're the only person in the kitchen, in all likelihood, you're not going to know what the conversation is. Right. But if you're hosting something in your backyard and you can understand the constraints to which your time management and your ability to be with your guests and enjoy, then that's the success of hosting. It's not meant to be a position where you're, stuck doing all the work while your friends are having a good time.
Yeah, I think I have a really dear friends at the lake that threw a really big party last year. And I remember saying to her, I didn't see you the whole party. Like, she was in the kitchen and making sure everything. And this year she came up to me, she said, I hired staff this time, right? Like, I took your advice, and she had a great time. She felt it the next day, but she had a great time. Yeah. And I think that that's something that I think people forget. Like, they put together this menu and they're like, okay, well, I'm just going to plate it myself and take it out and make sure. And I mean, you can hire staff for, $20 an hour. You get a few of them. Yes, they have minimums. Like, what would you say minimum is for staff right now? Like 3 hours, 4 hours?
Oh, I would say probably a bit more. Monetarily wise, I'd say you're probably not going to get anyone to show up for your event for less than $150.
Okay.
Like, as a flat kind of, in order for them to commit. And I think the thing about hosting and enjoying your time, like, I mean, budget is everything with hosting. I mean, regardless of what you're throwing, there's going to be a cost. That is the principle of hosting, is that you are paying for everything.
Great. Let's start there. Tip number 1, have a budget.
Have a budget.
Have a budget.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that budget should allow you to understand whether external staff are involved or not once you've created a menu and you've costed out that menu to a certain extent.
It's so funny you say that, because I think about it all the time. And again, like, our family's the one that does like hosting for all the big Jewish holidays and that type of thing. And I never think of budget. Like, I literally never think of budget. But then, it's a good idea, because if I'm looking at that and saying, or I wouldn't, let's say, because I do have help, but, someone is looking and saying, okay, it's going to cost me X amount of dollars to buy all the groceries, let's say, and I know people who host 20 people, 25 people, fine. And then you say, okay, then what's my hourly worth, right? So I'm going to put all of this, I'm going to cook all of it. And then I look and I say, or I could hire Peter Pan, I could hire a caterer to do this. Yep. Am I even in the same realm?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, there certainly is the opportunity cost of you doing it all on your own at what I would argue is a very inexperienced rate.
No kidding.
And yeah, I mean, and there's lots of different ways that staffing can help. You can staff the food element of it if you're not comfortable with the prep and the time management with that. You can, and to me, certainly the big advantage is afterwards is the cleanup. Do you want to be the person up for another 3 or 4 hours taking down the party instead of coming down and relaxing what would have likely been, even if you are a guest, a very tired night. But with compound that with the Jewish holidays or something like that, then yes, of course, having some sort of another input and not relying on family to have to be the person who helps you out doing that is tremendous value if you can justify it.
For sure. I mean, and not everybody will have that budget. And I definitely want to talk about different levels of budget. But, Easter dinner is coming. Passover dinner is coming for a lot of us. And we're thinking about it. And I know there's lots of ways of going about it. I know there's people who have chefs that come in and do it all themselves. And I mean, there's guys that get booked up year after year.
Our private dining room is booked for both Seders every year.
Wow.
Because for someone to come in and have the food done exactly the way they want and to show up and to leave without the hassle of anything at home and know that they're getting full service and know that they're getting a private space and knowing that they're going to have
it with family too, right? Like what's that
exactly.
value?
Then the cost relative to those other things that you mentioned, it's equal.
It is, right? And I think that people forget, like, you miss out, like that MasterCard, like it's priceless, but like, you miss out on that time. Like those dinners are supposed to be about family. And if you're up and down, clearing the soup, putting the stuff in the dishwasher, plating everything, then you're missing out on that dinner. And if you don't, I mean, I have teenage kids that I put to work, but yeah. For sure.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it has to be done by someone. Yeah.
And especially, I mean, groceries are not cheap anymore.
No.
This is not, you're not, cauliflower is like a $10. I never look at groceries. I have never looked at grocery prices before in my life. And now I'm like, I just paid $10 for a head of cauliflower. I don't buy processed food. So like I for the first time, I'm actually looking at vegetable prices. It's shocking. I'm lucky enough that I don't have to put the cauliflower back, but it's crazy.
It is starting to get noticeable. Like and there's an efficiency to, having someone who can buy wholesale or, that we often don't understand that the restaurants are sort of getting things at a cheaper rate and able to pass those
that's a good point.
things on forward. But yeah.
So okay. So we go from like, that's more formal. So then summer's coming. I feel like, oh, God help me. Please let summer be coming soon. I want to have a party and I'm going to, do buffet style. I really, how do you feel about buffet, especially, I know it's not plated, it's not pretty, but.
I think that when you're hosting, style of service is one of those major things that you have to commit to, and space will dictate that, guest count will dictate that, the amount of work that the host or hostess wants to do relative to the food and the time frame to which you're hosting or serving the food. A buffet to me is not a negative thing. It's not something that I see. I mean, there's constraints to every style of service. You can't offer the same food plated as you can buffet, but you also can't put a plated dish out for 2 or 3 hours and be happy with someone eating it. So,
right.
I would say that your style of service will dictate the food that you're doing. And as long as that's complimentary and you're happy with the way that it's going to be received, then that's the appropriate style you should be going with. You shouldn't try to execute a service that doesn't make sense within the framework of the guests or the space that you have.
Right. You're not doing a sit down for 50 people. Right. I mean, unless you have a mansion and you have staff and, that type of thing. I mean, the reality is you're going to have a party. So buffet versus pass around, though. Like, I think that that's something people, do you have a buffet of something a little bit more substantial? I love, like, my love language is appetizers. Like, I'm that person standing at the door when they're coming out at, like, those events. Yeah. Like, the ones you have to move out of the way.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, to me, I love those, but I also know that, like, they cost a premium. There's more labor involved, right? I mean, unless I'm wrong. So
yeah, no, you're totally right. So a buffet would be that you're setting food out in a situation where it's there in a safe environment, ready to be consumed at any point. And anytime you're getting into canapes or attended stations, you're getting into a labor aspect. And there's no reason that you couldn't do canapes but have them a buffet style. Like you could still have finger food that wasn't necessarily passed around. But again, you have to talk about the stability of what you're serving and how you want it to be received. I wouldn't put a hot canapé out and leave it there, for example. But if you had a heating lamp, there are certain dishes that could keep their integrity over time, and do it that way. So if there's no style of service that I would say that you can't do, regardless of budget. It's just a matter of attention. It's a lot more formal and a lot more enjoyable as a guest at an event if food is brought to you, as opposed to having to leave your social situation or context to go have to eat. But that being said, there are people who prefer not to be approached and prefer to have a station that they can go to and know what's available the whole time. So it really...
Anybody out there who does not want to be approached by food, call me so that I can explain to you how wonderful that concept is.
But again, as a host as well, like if you're responsible for the food, then maybe doing past appetizers isn't the thing, because it's going to keep you in the kitchen. And if you are going the staffing route, then doing past appetizers or canapes might be something that would be best left to someone who can monitor the timing a bit more.
Do you find the whole, not to go off topic, but do you find the whole, like, and this is someone who has, like, I have celiac, but like this whole, I can't have this, I'm a vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian, gluten-free, dairy-free. Like, has that, have you seen that change in the last 10 years? And do you find that even more, like, challenging? Like, we went back and forth with the menu for TNT, right? So, you have to find that balance of a great variety with also people's allergies, which I have one and I find it irritating of myself. You know?
I can imagine. I mean, I see it from both points of view, and my point of view is the same, is that it's difficult to be someone with an allergy and go into a situation where you feel that you can't have the food, or that you have to be safeguarded by it, or that you're being an inconvenience to the host or to the party to enjoy the food. But I mean, on a personal note, we encourage to know, like, for our guests to tell us everything in advance. Knowing things in advance is the best approach to it, because we're able to either amend the menu so that everyone is getting the same thing, so no one feels any sort of, this was special for me, or why is that person getting anything different, and it allows us to sort of know what we're dealing with, and we're happy to do so. The difficulty that restaurants get into, or hosts get into, is when it's like a la minute, when that allergy or that aversion pops up without our ability to accommodate it, or to know, because that's when you feel like a shitty host, or that's when you feel like you're not able to put out a product, or at least from a restaurant point of view, that we feel that had we known earlier, we would have put out something that had more integrity, rather than having to do it on the spot with what we have. Even though we're happy to do it, it's still not to the best integrity, or to having known in advance to do it properly.
Right. Yeah, because you really believe in your product, right?
Yeah, because we want everyone to feel comfortable being a guest, right?
Yeah.
Like, no one wants to have any of those emotions where they're feeling that they're an inconvenience, or that they're, somehow adding more work or anything. And the reality is that only really happens when it's done on the spot.
Food. Okay, so we're going buffet now. So I like canopies can be everywhere. I'm a big fan. I know they're really expensive. They're not for everybody's budget. It's true. You have to hire staff. They have to put around dishes, all that stuff. Although I do love it, because then you don't have to be holding a plate and forks, and then you have to put your drink down.
Yeah.
So, okay, but let's say we're going to go with buffet, because, we can't afford the staff. We're going to do some stuff ahead of time. Outside, inside, what do you think? Placement, like you're in a house. I feel like everybody always gravitates to the kitchen. I always think, like, is it true? Like, you should put the food not in the kitchen, because everyone's going to come to the kitchen anyway.
It depends where the host is. If the host is in the kitchen doing the food, people would gravitate towards the kitchen, because the host is there and there's some sort of like
buzz.
Yeah, about it. I would argue that if there's staff in the kitchen and the host isn't in there, that the way to go to people wanting to go into the kitchen to have that as the hub would be less likely.
Interesting. Yeah, because they'll be like, there's nothing exciting going on there.
Yeah, because and also that, there's an obligation to sort of want to be with the host. The host is the person you should be, is linking all those people together.
Yeah, that's a good point. I never thought about it. It's true. if I've ever left it to like a catering company or a chef, no one's really in the kitchen. It's true. But then I wouldn't have had the food in the kitchen either. Right. I would have had the food like in my dining room or pass around canopies or that type of thing.
Right. If you're doing a menu or you're, it also depends on party size, right? Like if you have a reasonable sized kitchen, let's say you can get, I don't know, maybe between 10 and 20 people inside there. If your party is that size and you want to do canapes without staff and you want to invite everyone in there and have a drink and have that almost like as the first station, then that's fair. I mean, that's managing your workload to be like, I'm not going to be able to both prep this stuff and serve it out and be with my guests. Right. I'm going to start it in here, and as people trickle in, this will be the spot, and then maybe everyone will move to another area when I don't want the party to be here, and I've curated another space to act as that second sort of part of the evening, whether it's meal or whether it's drinks or dancing or whatever it is. So I think that like the size of the party will dictate how the room or the space functions, and within that you can choose your style of service appropriately.
So now it'll be a good segue into moving. Like I am an owner of a 600 square foot condo. I can get 6 of my good friends in my condo. I don't really want to plate everything because like I don't have really a division. It's an open concept. Yeah. I also don't want to be like rattling around dishes and people watching me put my stuff in my dishwasher. What are your thoughts on how you would throw something like that? Are you better off to make it casual, or are you?
I'd say that there's 2 options there. I mean, a lot of the way that you waste time hosting is spending too much time in the kitchen and plating things and trying to make it more formal than it needs to be. If kitchen space is a constraint, then or if you have a small group and you just don't want to be doing things to that degree, then I would recommend family style. I think family style is an underappreciated form of style, whereas you would take the same things that you're having for your starter, for your main, but plate them in sort of shareable dishes. It keeps the person who's in the kitchen out of there because, again, the timing's much quicker to get it from prep to service vessel.
Service vessel. Is that a plate?
Yeah, plate or like a platter, anything that...
No, I love it. The terminology,
that, like, any vehicle that's getting food to
I'm
people.
I'm going to go home and tell my husband that we own service vessels.
But yeah, like family style is and it's a lot more interactive around the table as well. The idea of sharing food and passing it to each other and trying multiple things as opposed to having one dish that everyone has to have. And as well with allergies as well, with family style, you can often get away with plating 2 or 3 different things, and that gives you a little bit more leverage on allergies and accommodating certain things. You could, have one dish with a protein on it, and you could have a whole nother dish that was, a bit more vegan or vegetarian orientated, or if there was an allergy, just focused around that. So the person who had that allergy was able to, know that they have their own dish isolated.
Okay. And I feel like, let's say they're even going to go with like same thing, like they're just going to go with a buffet. They're thinking, you know what, I don't want everybody sitting down and maybe it's a little cramped. I want to have 6 people. I really only have a 4-person. We're going to do a little buffet. There's been a huge industry with like high-end disposables. Yep. So like some of them are just stunning, like, and expensive. Yeah. But I also feel like I know people who would never drink wine out of a plastic glass. And I know that sounds really like, snobby and uptight, but there are people who have things. And so I'm just curious, like from a restaurateur and I'm sure a purist, how do you feel about these really? Because some of them are gorgeous, but they're still disposable.
I think that it's appropriate to do in whatever context you want. It's hard to create a formal environment on plastic.
Okay, fair.
And so if you're doing something in your backyard, or you're doing something that might involve kids, or you're doing something that there are certain situations where I feel plastic is completely appropriate. And like you said, they're expensive. They're reusable. Like there's a whole sort of model now to getting things that have integrity to them.
Yeah, they don't go in the ocean. Right. Like they're definitely, or they can be recycled or whatever it is. But some of them are really like trying to go after that formal market. Yeah. like they're not of the yesteryears of like our parents would have had disposables
Yeah, I
that
think
would have
it's-
been an eyesore.
I think that comes into play really regularly when people want to host and they don't have the flatware or
They have enough,
or
right.
or they don't have enough and
Exactly.
they don't have very many options. Either you're renting, you're buying if you feel like this is something you want to invest in, or you're going, the safer route, which is okay, I just need to get out of this and I can get a substitute for X amount of dollars and not have to go plate shopping kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I see how people can justify it and why there's a place for it. But if hosting dinner parties is what you would like to do and your dinner set is only 6 or 8 for home use, then I would maybe consider doing that as a long-term solution would be a better approach to.
That's a good point for sure. Yeah, younger families. I probably only had like an 8-place setting early on when my kids were really small. And I would, I don't know what I did when I had like 16 or 20 people. I probably did that.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, most people don't have the infrastructure to host larger groups at home. But again, like if you have that plastic stuff, you can wash it. You can keep it in a box in the basement and know that if something happens to it, it's not the end of the world. But yeah.
I love it actually for dessert.
Yeah.
Like when I'm done at the end of the dinner and I don't want to see another plate or my dishwasher's full. I think like a really pretty plate and like plastic cutlery. No one cares by the time they're done their dessert kind of thing. They're like, sure.
Yeah, I think another thing to touch base on when people are hosting like condos is when and how to use your common space and the ability to host there and how to set yourself up appropriately to move your whole kitchen to another space and how to prep properly. I mean, time management and prepping is the key to hosting, in my opinion. It's the key to running a restaurant. We don't cook every dish from start to finish the minute someone orders it. We have,
Oh my God, we've been
everything.
waiting forever.
We have everything in a good place to as close as we can to keep the integrity as high as we can. For example, we won't cook fish in advance of the order being called. But the veg might be blanched or par cooked, or the risotto might be 3/4 cooked kind of thing. And I think that when you're hosting at home, knowing those tricks or knowing that you don't have to cook everything start to finish, and knowing how to manage your time,
Right.
and how to get it out properly is there. And there is an art to moving your kitchen if you are going to a common space, and it's just even to be even more organized and to know that you don't want to be running between the two spaces and have things as tight as you can get them.
What would you say would be like, and I'm sure you've been to enough of them, like, you're called on to, let's say, do the food, but then you're witnessing, the actual party being put together, and you're like, whoa, why did they do that? Can you think of any like major, like if you're thinking about throwing a party, what not to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's really difficult to see, like sometimes understand why people make certain decisions when they host, but that's why they're hosting. Quantity of food, quantity of alcohol,
Too
number
much,
of
too
staff.
little?
Yeah, too much, too little. What you're trying to get your guests to experience while they're there, and the time frame to which it's responsible to put them in situations. Are you having a 3-hour canapé, followed by a dinner? Is that the right timing? Are you serving the appropriate amount of food so that when people sit down for dinner, they're still hungry for it? Are people happy staying?
That's a good point. I agree. I feel like I've done them where like I always said like I want to make sure everyone's like almost full before they even sit down. You don't want people wait, like especially at weddings, right? Like they'll have like no appetizers right before, and then you're sitting through and you're like, when is dinner?
Yeah.
I'm gonna right?
Yeah. Even things like, people, dessert choices is an interesting one. I mean, we've all been to weddings and stuff where there's a formal dessert as part of the meal.
Chocolate fountain.
And then there's a cake, everyone needs a photo with the cake. And then there's, presumably some sort of snack table later. And, dessert's one of those things where very few people eat. It's.
I'm not a dessert person.
Most people in those environments, and they're certainly not going to eat 3 desserts. So that's something that sort of gets me every time is sort of just the timing to which and how much you're giving to people.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I didn't do dessert with you, but I did a candy table, and the candy table was gone. Craze Candy, way to go. They did a great job.
Yeah,
and I would do that.
done.
Yeah, I would do that over again for sure this year because it's true. People don't really eat dessert. That's something we didn't touch on. I feel like, I guess it depends on the But yeah, formal desserts, like I feel like Bubby and Zadie maybe, but like otherwise I don't even.
I mean, in some contexts, it's great if if you're coming for a corporate dinner and there's a reason to keep people in the chair. The people don't realize that like the length of time you're eating and what you're serving is dictating how long people are going to be seated for. And, if you're serving 2 courses and you want to go up and go dancing if you're having a meal and want to go dancing afterwards, maybe don't have that formal dessert that's either going to keep people in their chairs where you don't want them, or they're going to get up anyways and that dessert's never going to get touched. But on the other hand, if you're having a corporate meeting or a social gathering where, you just want to soak up as much time around the table as you can with people, then yes, of course, having that formal dessert and that coffee to keep people in that environment is necessary.
Yeah. So interesting. I feel like sometimes mine go really well, and I've seen them go really well, but you think about like all the minute details that go in depending on who's coming, what you want to achieve for sure. It's like, I think about my friends who do this summer party and they started at the right time. There's bars in the right places. There's the right amount of food, and it's to keep everybody there for a long time. And yes, there's a 1 a.m. pizza, like all that stuff, but that's going to be very dinner than your Easter dinner So budgeting, I want to like recap. I feel like budgeting, also like time management and understanding, like, am I going to be that person in the kitchen or am I not?
What space you have and can it support your style of service?
Thank you. And then I really like what you said was, what's the experience you want your guests to have? And I really like that. I think that like understanding, like, is it a casual? Is it a formal? Is this going to be a party or is it going to be a family event? Is it a short? And we talked about that. It was like, we're having something, it was a 7 to 9 or 7 to 10, I can't remember, but it was like a 3 hours, 7 to 10. And you were like, the food needs to come out right away, Rachel. Like, no one's waiting for this, right? Like, and we had steady food, and Noah understood exactly what needed to happen so that the guests who were coming to my party experienced that right moment, right time with the food, along with everything else.
Yeah.
So that was really good. I learned something. I feel like now I'm like not so like begrudgingly about the Pesach Seder anymore, but it does. It's going to get me starting to think about what I want to do for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So Noah, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
If anybody wants to get in touch with you personally, or if they want to, how do they book a reservation?
Sure, yeah.
Where are you located to hang out at Peter Pantry?
Yeah, all these and other things. We're located just east of Spadina on Queen, right at the corner of Queen and Peter. And you can contact us through all the regular avenues, phone, email, Instagram, however the people are doing that these days. And yeah, we'd love to hear how you want to host at Peter Pan or how we can help you host off-site. And if you want to come down for dinner, whatever you want, we're just happy to work with you.
Awesome. And I will note that the winner of the dinner at my event went on Instagram and raved about it. And she had the best time and called me after and thanked me so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
And she's a massive foodie. So
Great.
yes, so thank
Great.
you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Awesome.